When we think of the internet, we imagine wireless signals and cloud computing, but the reality is entirely physical. 97% of all international data traffic travels through cables resting at the bottom of the ocean. That physical infrastructure carries roughly $10 trillion in financial transactions every single day. Despite supporting the global economy, these lines are governed by outdated frameworks like the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, which offers almost no enforceable physical protection. We are now seeing the consequences of that vulnerability. In the Baltic Sea alone, investigators recorded a cluster of 11 suspected cable faults over a span of just 15 months. These aren't all accidents. Nations are actively engineering specialized deep-sea submersibles equipped with industrial cable-cutting devices, shifting the threat from random mishaps to deliberate sabotage. To secure this global asset, we have to map its physical topology, analyze the empirical data on how these cables break, and engineer active mitigation strategies. Securing these assets requires moving past the software layer and addressing the internet as a physical, vulnerable engineering system. Every transoceanic connection begins at a coastal landing station, where a single fiber-optic cable drops into the water and begins its descent into an increasingly hazardous environment. In shallow coastal waters, defined as anything up to 2,000 meters deep, specialized ships reel out the cable under strict tension to keep it perfectly straight. Because these shallow zones are heavy with maritime traffic, the cable is fed through a submerged trenching device that plows the seabed and buries the line, shielding it from external hazards like nets and anchors. But past the 2,000-meter mark, the topography suddenly drops off into the extreme depths of the open ocean. Down here, trenching is practically impossible. The cables are simply laid directly on the open seabed, completely exposed to the environment. To survive these depths, the cable relies entirely on its internal anatomy. At the center are the delicate optical fibers, bundled inside a PVC sleeve, and finally wrapped in a flexible outer jacket woven from metallic armor wire. Over thousands of miles, the light carrying the data naturally degrades. To fix this, operators install repeater units at set intervals to amplify the signal. These repeaters require their own dedicated copper power cores running through the cable to function. Housing live power alongside delicate glass fibers creates extreme physical complexity, making the entire unit highly susceptible to both mechanical damage and electrical short circuits. A cable's ability to survive the ocean floor is not guaranteed by the data it carries, but strictly dictated by its depth profile, its metallic armor, and its power integration. When we zoom out from a single cable to examine regional network topologies, we find severe geographic bottlenecks. India serves as a primary case study for this vulnerability. Currently, India's population and services sector consume a massive 20% of total global internet traffic. Despite this enormous data demand, the country hosts a mere 3% of the world's subsea cables. That is just 17 international lines supporting a fifth of the world's data usage. The danger compounds when we look at exactly where these lines make landfall along the western coast of the subcontinent. The vast majority of India's international data capacity converges on a single, hyper-concentrated 6-kilometer stretch of sand at Versova Beach in Mumbai. Contrast this with the European Union, which utilizes highly dispersed regional networks across dozens of distinct landing sites to ensure hardware redundancy. By routing nearly all international traffic through one physical location, extreme concentration of cable landing stations transforms a nation's digital economy into a high-probability target for a cascading network failure. This chart shows the empirical breakdown of historical cable fault causes by percentage, revealing exactly what damages these networks on a daily basis. Routine, involuntary maritime activity is the primary culprit. Bottom trawling by commercial fishing vessels accounts for roughly 45% of all subsea cable faults. Ship anchoring accounts for another 15%, while completely unpredictable natural hazards, like underwater earthquakes, cause less than 10% of disruptions. Hostile actors have studied this data. The emerging threat of state-sponsored blue crime relies on deliberately dragging an anchor or a commercial fishing net to mimic these routine maritime accidents, granting the attackers complete plausible deniability. Once a cable goes dark, operators face a logistical nightmare to fix it. Because these lines are laid under extreme tension, there is no slack to simply pull the broken pieces to the surface. A remotely operated vehicle descends to the seabed, locates the fault, and uses specialized hardware to cut the cable so the ends can be retrieved. Ship crews then undergo the grueling process of hoisting the highly tensioned ends up into the vessel's moonpool, clearing the water damage, splicing in a new section of fiber, and carefully lowering it back down. This introduces the strategic vulnerability of latency. Nations without domestic repair fleets must contract foreign consortiums, navigating complex regulatory approvals that can turn a standard 3-day physical repair into a months-long data outage. The primary strategic threat lies in the asymmetric delay and immense logistical complexity required to restore the network. To secure the seafloor, the global network must evolve. We must transition these lines from passive data conduits into active, self-monitoring sensor grids. The core engineering solution to achieve this is distributed acoustic sensing, or DAS. DAS sends a continuous laser pulse down a dedicated fiber. External threats above generate acoustic waves. These waves cause microscopic vibrations, altering the light's scattering. This backscattered light reflects to the source, outputting a readable frequency signature. By analyzing exact variations in that signature, operators can pinpoint the precise location, intensity, and classification of the vessel in real time. This system provides powerful ecological functions, passively monitoring underwater earthquakes, detecting volcanic eruptions and marine life migrations without deploying extra equipment. DAS solves the inherent blindness of the subsea network, providing comprehensive underwater domain awareness and stripping attackers of plausible deniability through immediate attribution. The final geopolitical reality is straightforward. Ensuring the absolute physical security of a 1.7 million kilometer underwater network is an engineering impossibility. The first pillar of modern resilience requires governments to mandate the spatial dispersion of new cable landing stations, physically eliminating localized choke points. The second pillar is the widespread integration of DAS technology across existing lines, serving as an active deterrent through instant threat attribution. Finally, the third pillar requires scaling space-based internet services. Constellations of low Earth orbit satellites provide immediate traffic redundancy when physical cables inevitably fail. Securing global connectivity requires abandoning the illusion of impenetrable physical borders. Instead, we must engineer a highly redundant, self-aware mesh that spans both the ocean floor and low Earth orbit.